Well, everybody, it's Shadow Eater here. Now, that's Shadow Eater. Anyway, I'm just trying to think of links between pagans, as in Neo-Pagans, pagans as they are now, and socialists. And I have socialist belief and pagan beliefs. Now, I found this piece done in the LA Progressive. Hello, little lady. And what are you doing? It's a piece by Bruce Lerro. I think that's how you say it. Lerro. I'm not sure. But the title is New Agers versus Neo-Pagans can either be salvaged for socialism. That was a really interesting title. Really interesting title. Now, Bruce, if you have a problem, let me know. I will take this back down. But after reading a bit into this and doing a skim through the rest of it, I'm liking what I'm reading, so I thought I'd share it. So again, Bruce Lerro, and I'd also add that he says his own what the sources are. So, New Agers versus Neo-Pagans can either be salvaged for socialism. Now, I don't look at, whilst our system is set up the way especially in the UK. Now, a lot of this is going to talk about America, but he does mention that this stuff happens in America, in the US, and England. He specifically mentions that. So, on the English side of things, or British, the way Parliament's set up, we have a Prime Minister. This is true, but I've already mentioned on this channel how I reckon we should have a Wotan for each department. A council of ministers that head a department, say 3 ministers and 3 experts in that field in the department with their civil servants. Yeah? But anyway, so he starts this way. I think I mentioned this, but again, this is in the LA Progressive. Anyway, Bruce Lerro. As capitalism has gone into deep decline in the United States and England beginning in the 1970s, 2 spiritual movements have sprung up outside Judeo-Christianity and Islam. The New Age and Neo-Paganism. Now, I will say the Islam bit, he didn't put in there, but it's also related. Neo-Pagans have a great deal to teach 21st century socialists if only we would listen. As capitalism has gone into deep decline in the United States and England beginning in the 1970s, the two spiritual movements have sprung up outside Judeo-Christianity, the New Age and Neo-Pagans, and contrary to some socialist claims that Neo-Pagan Wiccans, Druids, and ceremonial magicians, and others like me and ourselves, he argues that there are at least 27 differences between the two. He claims that these differences could be the basis of an alliance between Neo-Pagans and 21st century socialists. This is a good point, right? We need, in our political thinking, whether that's on the right in the center or on the left, we need to move into the 21st century and adapt our political thinking to, you know, what's actually going on now, not based on what went on last century. Anyway, so orientation. In the beginning, in the late 70s, Yankeedom, never heard of that term, so Yankeedom became increasingly conservative as the standard of living declined. The white working class flocked to the more conservative fundamentalist churches where they were told to vote for a conservative in the 1980 elections. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot of the you know, this is the white working class. Now, technically, I'm from the working class, not the middle class, and even then, I'm technically disabled. But you know, my mentality has been that of, you know, I pick up what uni students were talking about easier than what my contemporaries were talking about. I was more interested in what people older than me and interested in higher intellectual things. This is not to be egotistical, but still. Anyway, yeah. So it says well, the white working class flocked to the more conservative fundamentalist churches where they were told to vote for a conservative in the 1980 elections. But what happened to the middle and upper classes? They also experienced an economic decline. For some, their strategy was to reject organized religion and build two alternative spiritualities: the New Age on one hand and Neo-Paganism on the other. This article compares and contrasts them to each other. Them to each other. He begins the article with the economic conditions of Yankeedom between 1948 to about 1978. He then provides working definitions of each movement, when they started, and who their major contributors were. He then compares and contrasts the New Age and Neo-Paganism in depth. So New Age, you know, the hippie kind of stuff. There are similarities and differences to pagans, and then even then it depends on what kind of pagan you're talking about. Are you talking about Celtic pagan, and if then even then, are you talking about Irish Gaelic or Gaelic, or are you talking about Scot, or are you talking about European, mainland Europe, or are you talking about Wales, or are you talking about Cornwall, East, South, well, parts of Devon? You get the point. And then you've got the more Germanic pagans, and I'm just talking from a British basis here. So you got the the ones who follow the Anglo-Saxon ways. You got the ones who follow, whilst they're all neo-pagans technically, if you're being specific. But even if they're being even if they are trying to be traditional, because they're not going to have all of the information, they're still technically neo-pagans. It's just a weird definition. I find it a little bit, yeah. But even then, paganism could be broken down into the Norse side of things, the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxon side of things, the Slavic side of things, the Romano-Celtic side of things. You got then you've got the other pagan faiths. So you've got Hinduism, which is technically a pagan faith, polytheistic in any case. The what do they call them? Folk religions and cult religions, which I think is a bit derogatory, to be honest, of Africa and the Middle East and East and South America and North America. Like, yeah. Anyway, he begins with what they have in common, but he spends most of the article contrasting their differences across the 27 categories, including the importance of the past and the future, attitude towards Christianity, the methods of achieving altered states of consciousness, importance of the paranormal, and attitude and stance towards authority. Now, as a pagan that wants us to be better represented in British society, it's been difficult for those who were like me before. Was more difficult before because it was that anti-establishment. Yes, there is still the anti-establishment sort of thing there, but that doesn't mean that we can't, organise in a way that we feel comfortable with. Not, in a rigid structure in necessarily the way the Judeo or the Abrahamic religions have done. But, for me, there's an evolutionary aspect to this. Like I said, my threads for thinking is more from paleontology. I grew up, most of my life has been, my biggest interest has been paleontology and the tree of life and how that works, how evolutionary biology works, how evolutionary zoology, how evolution works. And over the last 4 or 5 years, when I've been stuck more inside, I've actually been noticed more of the aspects you can apply to, that you can notice from biological evolution. You can take that kind of thinking and look at society and cultures in the same way, or not exactly the same way, but you can use that structure of thinking. This is where I come from, and it's more natural. The way I see the different the different Neo-Pagans is, and the way they communicate, it's a more organic structure, less than an ordered structure, if that makes sense. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, also, but he begins with what they have in common and spends most of the article contrasting contrasting the differences across 27 differences, including the importance between past and future, including attitude towards Christianity. Again, that's the other one I wanted to mention, was attitude towards Christianity. Now, I have also mentioned on this channel, and it's probably a little bit inflammatory for some, and it might confuse others. And I have noted also that I might be confusing terminology, so let me know. But in terms of Christianity, to me, I've been, as a pagan, as an open pagan, I have been picked on by Christians, Muslims, and Jews in the streets. I don't start these arguments. Being openly pagan, they're what do you call them? The type of, I can't remember what is it, Orthodox Jew, the ones with the hats and the side whiskers. Walking through Plymouth, and I come across a couple a day, and they look, stay away from me. Why can't you dress normally? What? Just have a dress. Back then it was a bit more gothic, but still. Yeah, Christians have been the biggest problem, but then it's a Christian majority in this country. Muslims have had problems with me, especially in professional fields. They because I have pagan beliefs. It's something I've noticed about people that come from a one God culture. It's because my God is the real one and yours, which means is the only real one. Hello, girlie. Which means that yours can't be real. That means that they look down on anyone else who doesn't believe what they believe, especially when it comes to paganism. They just look down on us in a very derogatory way, whether that's Islam, Judaism, or Christianity. So, in that sense, I am anti-Semitic. Again, that might come across as inflammatory. I may be using the wrong terminology, so again, let me know. But not in the hate sense. I don't go around, fucking on Facebook and whatnot, and YouTube and just lambaste Christians and Jews and Muslims, in the racist sense. I'm anti them. I'm anti their beliefs, in that I do not believe that I should go around trying to convert everyone. I don't believe in there being just one God. So, and the attitude they take, that their cultures take towards people with polytheistic culture. So, yeah. The methods of achieving altered states of consciousness: drugs, alcohol, but there are other methods you can use to get there, not just drugs and alcohol. Such as certain, missing the word. I am missing the word right now, and it's still going to do my nut. No, it's going to do my nut. The sort of a trance. You can put yourself into a sort of trance. I'm not sure that's, even now, I'm not sure that's the right word. But you don't necessarily need mind-altering drugs or alcohol. The importance of the paranormal, yeah. See, for me, to me, that means the worship of the ancestors and communication with them. An attitude towards authority, which I spoke to begin with. As a materialist, Bruce's concern is also with New Age and Neo-Paganism's place on the political spectrum and their attitudes towards capitalism. Lastly, I examined their class composition and their stance on feminism. I closed part 1 of this article by asking questions on how relevant both movements might be to 21st century socialism. But in part 2 of this article, I answer the questions I've raised. His sources for this article are The Emerging Network, A Sociology of New Age and Neo-Pagan Movements by Michael York, The New Age Movement by Paul Helas, I think that's how you say that, Helas, Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler, and The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson. I will also draw on my personal experience, having lived in and around both of these movements in San Francisco Bay Area, jokingly referred to as Neo-Pagan capital of the world. Like I said, for me it's from a British perspective, but he does mention England in it as well. Between the ages of having lived and referred to as between the ages of 30 and 50 during 1970 and 1990. I also witnessed part of the Burning Man phenomenon, which some say is the essence of New Age. Well, yeah, sort of. Yankeedom. So this first part. So Yankeedom economic roller coasters from 1950 to 1990. Marxian economists agree that between the end of World War II and about 1971, were the golden years of capitalism, at least in Yankeedom. So, America. Germany and Japan were decimated by the Second World War and offered no competition to Yankee capitalists. The white working class never had it better. The unions were stronger than ever, especially over here. About 1 worker in 3 was in a union. The GI Bill was allowed these workers to buy cheap homes in the newly built suburbs and go to college tuition free if they wanted. The Yankee rulers were so wealthy that they were taxed up to 90% of their earnings, and they still made great profits. A working class family lived comfortably on 1 income, and the job on average was around 40 hours a week. So way before my time. What are you two doing? Under these abundant conditions, it's no accident that there were no New Age or Neo-Pagan movements, because movements were more likely to emerge when economic, political or ecological conditions were difficult. Now, yes, this is true, but it also has to be said that pagan traditions, especially over here, pagan traditions and words stuck around, even if the country became majority Christian. Economically, things began heading south in the early 1970s. Germany and Japan had recovered from the war and were beginning to compete with the Yankee capitalists. One response from the Yankee rulers, rather than competing directly with these two nations, was to rip off more surplus value from workers. Yankee capitalists uprooted manufacturing jobs and then set up factories in what were then called third world countries, where land and labour were cheaper. So yeah, Africa and South America and such, and Middle East. These were called runaway shops. This meant the end of well-paying manufacturing jobs for workers. Unions were not strong enough to stop this, especially over here. Margaret Thatcher over here did her whole breaking the unions bullshit. Cheered on the other side of the pond by Nixon. I think it was Nixon. Might be wrong on that one. Let me know. But yeah, it was ridiculous. No retaining was provided by the state, as workers had to scramble to find semi-skilled or unskilled jobs. The second Yankee capitalists squeezed surplus value out of workers. The second way Yankee capitalists squeezed surplus out of workers was to increase the number of hours workers laboured under during the week and the number of hours worked each day. By the 1980s, the average work week had risen from 40 to 50 hours per week, and working class and middle class households required 2 incomes. Workers struggled with insecure jobs, and the unions were unable to protect workers' healthcare benefits. Workers began to lose confidence in the unions, and union membership declined. Yeah, again, especially in Britain. And the unions have done so fucking much, it's unreal. It has to be said, on the other side of things, that even I think a union boss actually said this at the time. I think it was 1976 or something. That the unions had too much power. They weren't supposed to be there to have power. A third decision the ruling class made was to invest their money in financial capital rather than industrial capital. In 1971, the rulers decided to go off the gold standards, as the reserve currency and the dollar had no gold backing. I think I remember watching a few videos about this, and reading something. Made everyone else go mad. And as reserve currency, off the gold standard as reserve currency, and the dollar had no gold backing, capital could be exchanged by bankers without needing gold to back it up. In addition, the United States had lost in Vietnam, essentially, and the oil embargo by the OPEC countries sent a shiver down the spines of the Rockefellers. The Rockefeller-sponsored Club of Rome project. Not entirely sure what that is. 2 seconds. I'm probably being very stupid right now, but give me 2 seconds. Club of Rome is a non-profit informal organisation of intellectuals and business leaders whose goal is a critical discussion of pressing global issues. The Club of Rome was founded in 1968 at Academia dell'Insia in Rome, Italy. It consists of 100 full members selected from current and former heads of state, government, UN administrators, high-level politicians and government officials. Covering people's well-being and global warming and such. So a bunch of rich people and intellectuals and stuff that apparently are being philanthropic, maybe. Anyway, the Rockefeller-sponsored Club of Rome project told the Yankee population that the population pressure was a real problem and people needed to live on less. Yankeedom was in economic decline. By the late 1970s, Jimmy Carter was telling its population that we need to learn to do with less. All this is not the kind of news that the American population expected to hear. I'm not entirely sure why he keeps calling him Yankee. It's like he's English, or that's something from America that I just don't get. Anyway, all this is not the kind of news that the Yankee population expected to hear. Increasingly, politicians were distrusted, while the mainstream religions were seen by both middle class and upper middle class sectors of the population as part of the problem. It is in these declining conditions that the Neo-Pagan and New Age movements should be understood. Both alternatives were optimist spiritual reactions to a depressed state of the political economy and mainstream religion. What does New Age and Neo-Paganism have in common? Before we define the New Age and Neo-Paganism, let's begin by what they have in common. Though the seeds of these movements are difficult to pin down, the time of their clear presence was remarkably similar. Neo-Paganism arrived in 1979 with the simultaneous publishing of 2 books, Starhawk's The Spiral Dance and Margaret Adler's book Drawing Down the Moon. And possibly, what's his face from Avebury came up Wicker. For the New Age, the founding text, The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson, was published in 1980. Both movements were strongly motivated by a rejection of mainstream Judeo-Christian religion. Both movements believed in the power of personal experience, whether magical or mystical, as opposed to trusting religious authorities, whether they be priests or rabbis or other. Each believed that every individual had a higher self that superseded the ego. Isn't that Freudian? The ego and that's something that do. Anyway, the experience of novices of both Neo-Paganism and New Age movements when they first found out about the movements is mostly described as homecoming. There are no reports of conversion. I didn't. I was exposed to paganism. I wasn't converted. Didn't have someone saying you should be pagan. Both agree that evil is not an objective force, as in the form of a devil. Rather, each think that evil has an either psychological or social origin. Neither intends to grow bigger, as there are no neo-pagan or New Age missionaries. Each is life-affirming and optimistic, rather than life-denying and pessimistic. Not just that, but we accept death. Like, death isn't the enemy, which is something that Tom Rousel also points out in his piece. Each movement was decentralized, consisted of word of mouth, grapevines, and networking. See, like I said earlier, a more organic way of working. Neither movement has a national central organisation. Neo-Pagans are militantly against centralisation, and Wiccan covens closely resemble anarchist organisations. New Age's interests span a larger number of disciplines, and the whole movement is more of an eclectic mishmash with no particular centre. Partly for these reasons, and the precise number of people in each movement, partly for these reasons, the precise number of people in each movement is hard to pin down. Both movements are located in the United States and to a lesser extent in England. I was kind of challenged. I mean, this is from last year. No, so yeah, look, you have to be careful when comparing. I've learned that I have to be careful when comparing what's going on with neo-paganism in America and what's happening in Europe and Britain. What's happening is slightly different. I mean, the fastest demographics in Britain are pagans, neo-pagans, those who class themselves as pagan or Wiccan or Druid or whatnot. Yeah, there's at least as many of us as Hindus in this country now. Yeah, like, it's not about gaining numbers though. Whilst this is, it's not about converting people to being pagan and to believe what we believe, but the fact that such a large amount of people moved. It's not just at the time he's saying either. Like, I've noticed a large shift in the last decade, especially with, with Tory austerity. And there was a huge boom. Like in 2011, this was being talked about, and even then, there was a massive boom. Both are critical of depicting change in a gradual, linear, and inevitable way. Each sees changes happening in cycles, and when something new emerges, it is the product of non-linear dynamics. Summarising the commonalities: point of origin, late 70s. Place, United States or England. Economic conditions, the decline of industrial to finance capital. Religion, rejection of Judeo-Christianity, and I would add is the growing Islam, because they're all related, although that was not one that was specifically pointed out. Authority, distrust of religious, political and scientific authorities, value of personal experience. Now, this is where I might differ from a number of pagans or New Agers, because, again, my thought processes are scientific, but again, I have to add that there's, quite a lot that I will challenge when it comes to scientists. I'm not an absolutist, which means that there is likely a lot more to find and a lot more for us to discover. Anyway, type of self, a higher self, young Atman self in Hinduism. So, I think it's Charles Young. I think Carl Jung, even. Outlook, optimistic, mostly. No need for conversion or proselytizing. I'm not entirely sure about that word, but conversion. There's no need for it. Our numbers are growing, and yet we don't need to convert people. Organization decentralized. Yeah, like they're different. We're all different groups. We just communicate. Shape of time. Both see the limits of linear time. Each sees change as happening in cycles, spirals, and non-linear ways. Yeah, see, I have mentioned on this channel before that the way I see, if there is a shape to time, like, it's multi-layered for a start, and it kind of does that with breaks in it for it. Each person's life, their experience of time, to me, its shape would be threefold. So quantum, what they perceive, and macro, and it all kind of goes spiral, apart from quantum, because that's in the middle and around everything. But again, spiral, and these breaks are for deaths, and then rebirth, and then reincarnations. So the reincarnations of the soul, So anyway, defining the New Age. Why Aquarian? Many consider the book The Aquarian Conspiracy to be the Bible of the New Age movement. The title of the book locates the New Age within an astrological framework. Supposedly, we are coming out of the darker side of the age of Pisces, the age of spiritual decline, and into the age of Aquarius. Astrologically, the Aquarian age means the age of experimentation, innovation, light, healing, and love. In what areas do we see these characteristics operating? Ferguson tells us the spirit is operating in many fields. Brain science and consciousness studies, the new science of general systems theory and physics, medical health with alternative medicine, in education and spirituality. The problem here is that by calling this movement Aquarian or even New Age, gathers people in these fields under an astrological umbrella. Some of the schools of thought I listed, such as the complexity theory of Prigogine, someone let me know. The general systems of theory of von Bertalanffy, or the philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn, would hardly be happy with astrological associations. Neither would Ferguson's heroes L.L. White, Jan Smuts, author of Holism and Evolution, Alfred North Whitehead, or Gregory Bateson. Let's accept this unfortunate start and say that she is on to something regardless of its astrological associations. Who are its heroes and heroines? New Age. Besides those mentioned above, who are the rest of Ferguson's New Age heroes? In history, we have Toynbee, de Tocqueville, and William Irving Thompson. In education, A.S. Neal and Ivan Illich. In globalization of society, there is Marshall McLuhan, Teilhard de Chardin, Delard de Chardin, Delord de Chardin, Willis Harman, and H.G. Wells. In brain science, there is Karl Pribram. In physics, Fritjof Capra, Tau physics, and David Bohm. Mystics of many ages are claimed as predecessors: Meister Eckhart, Jacob Bohm, Pico, and William Blake. And closer to the present, the New England Transcendentalists William James, author of Varieties of Religious Experience, and Buck, the author of Cosmic Consciousness. There are two humanistic astrologers who are especially important to the New Age: Dane Rudyard and Mark Edmund Jones. Mythologists like Joseph Campbell and psychomythologists like Jung were enormously popular. I have a book that I need to give back to a friend. The Way of the Shaman by Carl Jung. Very important to the New Age was the work of Ken Wilber and Jean Houston. Wilber's first book, The Spectrum of Consciousness, it created a continuing link between psychology and spirituality. From there, he went to write spiritual books on social evolution, Up from Eden, and developmental psychology, The Atman Project. Jean Houston also straddled the line between psychology and spirituality with what she coined sacred psychology. She wrote books which showed how Greek mythology could be used for psychological growth. Her book, Life Force, described the history of the West based on 5 stages of self-development. These stages were based on the work of Gerald Hurd. In the field of secular psychology, the humanistic psychologists Maslow and Rollo May and Eric Fromm were part of the human potential movement, not the New Age. But some of these humanistic psychologists were also interested in LSD and were influenced by Aldous Huxley and later by Stanislav Grof, along with the popular shamanism of Carlos Castaneda. New Age is not just rebelling against organized religion. Also, there's another title: Down with Mechanistic Reductionist Science. The New Age is also about reacting to conventional science with its over-specialization. This over-specialization keeps traditional science from seeing the big picture and having an interdisciplinary perspective. Which, yeah, it's like I loved what was said in Star Trek Discovery, I think it was. The scientist working on the spores that they use, the mycelium network that they use to travel around the galaxy. The way he describes it no, it's not biology and physics, it's biology has physics or physics has biology. And I think that's along a similar line here, and I love that line because, and I kind of, if this goes into what I think, if he's talking what I think he's talking about, this is what I meant by I take my paleontological thinking and apply that to other disciplines. So yeah. New Agers complain about mainstream science's tendency to reduce all complexity in nature to physics. It also rejects dualism involving separation of mind from matter and mind from body. It believes that modern science is slow, plodding, and preoccupied with gradually building things up. What this misses is that nature is full of surprises and qualitative leaps, whether in scientific knowledge scientific knowledge, kun, physics, boom, and the nature of subatomic particles, capra, or biology, Gould's punctuated equilibrium. Change does not often appear in a linear way, but in a non-linear manner as prescribed by Prigogine. Lastly, conventional science sees nature as mechanistic and driven by external forces rather than organic and self-regulating. Von Barton-Lanfy, General Systems Theory. Yeah, again, I think this is also touched on by Michael Crichton in the Jurassic Park in the books, and it's where Malcolm starts talking about non-linear dynamics, non-linear mathematics, and you know, that whole thing of life has a way. Like, there is, what's the right way to put this? There's an almost dogmatic way that a number of scientists are thinking along. Like, they treat religion like a science, like religion, like it can't be wrong, like it can't, like, you know, new information won't change what's there. Now there is the thing of a fact is a fact, but the more we learn, the deeper we dig into these things, the more we find out how complex these things are. It's another theory, you know. It also links into my non-absolutism. You know, again, treating, you know, you got physicists, experimental physicists, and theoretical physicists still having arguments. Biologists and chemists having arguments. Why? Oh, because one field is my field. I don't give a fuck. I spent most of my life learning about evolutionary science, and one reason I love paleontology is you've got chemistry with the geology of it, physics with it as well, and the biology. So in paleontology alone, you're using the three basics of science: physics, biology, and chemistry. And now we're looking at possibly, you know, maybe not the quantum realm, quantum mechanics, although I'm in another video I'm quite happy to go looking to see if there are links between quantum mechanics and paleontology. I can't see it right this second, but possibly. Anyway, but yeah, like I said, it's a problem. It's one of the things, it's another aspect, another factor of getting away from 20th, 19th and 20th century thinking. Get out of that. Think differently. Okay, so next bit, sharpening the boundaries of the New Age. One problem with the New Age is it's fuzzy, overly inclusive. Okay, I'll start again. One problem with the New Age is its fuzzy, overly inclusive boundaries. For example, its inclusion of the human potential movement within it. When we look at the practice of the human potential movement, the psychological boundaries of individuals were pushed much more aggressively than most of the practitioners of the New Age would be comfortable with the exception of guru groups like EST of Rajneesh. I think that's Rajneesh. Anyway, secondly, the use of hallucinogenics in the early 70s had no official approval, and the psychologists who were treating those who became to SLN as human experiments. Fritz Perls and Will Schutz got into raging fights. Perls slept with many of the participants at Esalen and took enjoyment in reducing them to tears. What a bastard. Many of the group therapy sessions were done in the nude with no structure, explanation, or reasons. Group marathons were held all weekend, people opening people up without offering any follow-up support. This method is hardly about bringing love and light to people that New Agers advocate. Yeah, this just sounds stupid. The human potential movement was primarily psychological with spirituality on the periphery. Yes, I remember books by Alan Watts and Damien on the coffee table of hippie friends in Berkeley in 1970, but they were more the exception than the rule. The New Age was primarily spiritual with psychology on the periphery. So the human potential movement is just the other way around. The New Age, lastly, the New Age was more supportive of the petty bourgeois capitalism, whether it be small shops or decentralized economies. Small is beautiful. The human potential movement was generally silent about capitalism. So, okay, I'm not. Yeah, I don't want to see myself as a New Ager in that sense. So, defining Neo-Paganism. Monotheism is but imperialism in religion. Yeah? A quote by James Breasted. It is also significant that one group that Marilyn Ferguson never mentions as exemplars of New Age were Neo-Pagans. For the reasons for this will be clearer later on in this article, but for now it's just worth mentioning. Okay. Roots of Neo-Paganism. Neo-Paganism clearly came of age in the late 70s and has grown since then, but just how far back does it go? In terms of the Wicca tradition, there was the work of Gerald Gardner in the 1940s. That was the guy I was thinking of. However, in terms of ceremonial magic, Neo-Paganism goes back to the 19th century with Golden Dawn. But ceremonial magic has a long history in of itself, going back further to the Renaissance magic of Ficino, Bruno, and Paracelsus. The term neo-pagan generally refers to pagan practices since Gerald Gardner reconstructed Wiccan ritual practices, which in of themselves I am sure he was basing those mostly off of Celtic traditions. Not entirely sure. I think that's Druidic. Like New Age, Neo-Pagan, so types of Neo-Pagans. Like the New Age, Neo-Pagans exist on a spectrum. So modern Wiccans include Gardnerian Wicca, which originated in England and was the first reconstructed Wicca, which drew from Margaret Murray and Robert Graves. Number 2, Alexandrian Wicca, which also originated in England and was more than other Wiccas, has hierarchical grades and tests that must be passed to advance, which I think I don't subscribe to that kind of bullshit myself. Dianic Wicca focuses on a single goddess and Diana, and consists of virtually all women covens. They also draw from Margaret Murray. Zed Budapest is a famous example. Americans might say Z Budapest. I'm English, I say Z. Number 4, Fairy Wicca, specifically working with nature spirits. Gay men have been influential. Starhawk's group Reclaiming is part of this. Ethnic and historical Neo-Pagans aim to revive pre-Christian practices of the Greeks, Romans, Druids, Celtic and Norse traditions. I kind of fall more under that one. When it comes to the pagan side of things, under this list, this is what I would put myself down as. Ethnic/historical neo-pagan. The Voodoo, the These practices developed in Africa and Haiti, combining magic with Catholicism. It used to be called voodoo. Again, that's something I mentioned earlier in this video. In this video in of itself, I think. Ceremonial magic, which draws from the Golden Dawn and the work of Aleister Crowley. I just knew his name was going to be dragged into this. Ceremonial magicians tend to synthesize systems such as the Tree of Life and the Tarot and astrology. Neo-Pagans, who emphasize the future based on science fiction writers, the Church of All Worlds is an example of this. I'm sure I'm familiar with that one. Jungian, I'm pretty sure that's Jungian, archetypal psychology. While Jungians are not themselves a type of paganism, there are Jungian interpretations of what Wiccans and ceremonial magicians are up to. Besides Jung, James Hillman's polytheistic psychology and the work of David Miller have done a great deal to make paganism respectable in the eyes of psychologists, which is it pisses me off about the psychologists I went to see in Plymouth, because they treat you with no such respect. Margaret Adler, I keep getting her name wrong. Margot Adler has brought a Jungian perspective to the history of paganism. Vivian Crowley has done the same in England. Robert Bly has added a mythopoetic slant to involving more men in men's mystery traditions. Okay. Who does Neo-Paganism exclude? Excluded are most Eastern mystical groups with an authoritarian structure, Christianity and Satanism, which most Neo-Pagans consider reverse Christianity. Exactly. Like, it's just, I'm one of those. Like, to me, Satan is also, I love it. Like, the amount of times I've been walking down the road with my staff, and I have a pentagram, whatever you want to call it, on my staff, and people look at me and go, "Oh, it's Satanist." I've got nothing to do with Christianity, you fucking moron. What? It's pagan, not Satanist. Not Christian. Satanists aren't Christian. Yes, they are fucking Christian. Because they believe in Satan, you fucking moron. Anyway. Characteristics of Neo-Pagans. Though there are significant differences between Neo-Pagan groups, they do share the following characteristics, which is some... especially amongst North and Western European pagan cultures. So, number one, first bullet point, the sacred sources are plural. If there is a belief in animism, polytheism, or pantheism in nearly all of them. Pretty much all of them. There is one exception to this, and that is some feminist Wiccans insist on revering a single monotheistic goddess, Diana. I think that comes under other names as well, but still. Recently there has developed paganism without gods and goddesses. Mark Green has developed something called antheo-paganism, and John Halstead has cultivated something he calls humanistic paganism. I'm not sure what exactly. Elemental paganism? Like, it's strange. Whilst, you know, a lot of my cultural ways are of Anglo-Saxon, Celtic or Norse tradition, my actual religious beliefs in the sense of my gods are the elements. So fire, water, wind, earth, light, dark and electricity. Not sure what you put that down as. Again, so if someone has a good idea of how you could possibly label me within the group of Neo-Pagans, I'd be very interested. Next one is sacred sources are immanent, not transcendent. This means that the material world is self-regulating and does not require intervention. Nature is all we technically need. Yeah. Now, all of this, I didn't. Whilst some of it was bought, it was a case of necessity, and most of this, the cages anyway, were bought. All of this was Fitbits I found. So, anyway, like the material world, like the material world, the human body is not in a fallen state. The senses and sexuality are celebrated, not depreciated. Yes, I have always had this problem with the concept that the state that supposedly the state we are in is just the lowest state. Fuck off. And from my personal side, my personal point of view, that's a pile of crap. We are all different, and yet there are similarities between us. It's one of the reasons why I have such a problem with racism, and is why I will reject racist elements of anti-Semitic behaviour. Being anti-Semitic or anti-Abrahamic might be a better term, in that I do not follow. It's not like I am Abramophobic or Judeophobic. I hate them. I'm just anti them. I'm anti a lot of their beliefs. Like some of their beliefs are just generic things that you find across many different religions, polytheistic and monotheistic, and values that atheists can have that aren't actually religiously based. But this whole thing of as far as I'm concerned, the point that humans are at now is born of millions of years of evolution, of trial and error, of nature working its way out, of going around in the cycles of the spiral, moving forward, but trying and retrying different things in different orders. I see this a lot in evolutionary science. Convergent evolution. Two different creatures learning how to fly in two different ways and from two different origins. It's fascinating. But yeah. The next point. Sexuality is the other one. There are differences between the sexes. It's called sexual dimorphism, whether that's through behaviour or through, visually. And whilst I don't if you are someone who is asexual in their thinking, if that makes sense, in that they don't care about sex, they're about defining sexes. If that's you, you do you, mate. That's fine. But I don't believe that personally. Again, I will specifically point out here, I will not hate on those people. I just don't agree with it. Anyway, the method of altering state, sticking with the sexes a second. I have a big problem with the hating of transsexuals. I suppose this might be where I might come into contradiction with myself, philosophically speaking. Because I don't. What? Whilst personally, I don't actually hold anything against transsexuals at all. Like one of my best friends was a transsexual, and she died. Um, would I do it? No, I don't have gender dysphoria. I don't suffer with that kind of problem. Um, I've always been interested in the other sex, but not. It's just not something that really occurred to me, honestly. Um, you know, I again, I like I said, I don't have a problem with them. I just wouldn't do it myself, nor would I necessarily advise it. It's not something I believe in, but again, just because I don't believe in that doesn't mean other people can't believe in that. You know that that's their life. I, I I won't accept that you have to stick to this narrow band. As nature moves, as evolution moves on, it's not just our biological nature, our biological evolution we need to take into account. It's when we're talking about trans and stuff like this, people are like, "Oh, if you're born man, you're born a man. If you're born a woman, you're born a woman." There is some truth to that. However, the way we think in a cultural, societal sense also evolves. And this phenomenon is not going to go away. And pagans, neo-pagans, and monotheists are both going to have to come to terms with it. Because I've seen problems, I've seen pagans who have a problem with transgender and transsexuality. I see it more from Christians and Jews and Muslims, but no one near as much. But I do also see it from pagans, and so I'm bringing the article up on my laptop instead of consistently going back to my phone. Um, and I just like I said, for me, I don't see a problem if you yourself feel that it, like by of nature, your your body does not represent your your weird your weird um your ken your soul spirit. um and given that pagans are supposed to think in a biological sense, in a more organic sense, these anomalies are bound to happen. That's what happens in um in an organic non-linear system. Again, it's something else that's pointed out in Michael Crichton. Like, it's something else he points out in Jurassic Park. I think it's either Jurassic Park or Jurassic Park: The Lost World. One of the two books. Malcolm points it out. I think it's the first one. Alright. Sorry, it's just for some reason it's just not coming up on my laptop the same way it did on my phone, which is a pain in the ass. Ah, there it is. Right. No, I'll put my fucking phone back on charge. So I gotta find out where I was again. Yeah. So yeah, we'll move on to the next one because I spent enough on the material world, the human body and senses and sexuality. Anyway, the method of altering states of consciousness is through a collective ritual in which the imagination and senses are saturated through the arts using music, song, dance, incense, and mask making. This is also called the art and science of magic. Yeah. You know, as I take, my paganism takes influence from mostly the Germanic and Celtic faiths. And on the Celtic side of things, it's more of the Druidic, the bardic singing, the Druidic tradition of bards, and science has proved that singing out loud to music you absolutely adore is good for you. Like, there's a sort of shamanism to that. Anyway, Neo-Pagans are generally anti-authoritarian and do not accept revealed sacred knowledge. Magical practices are experiential, sorry. Yeah, pretty much. Sacred knowledge, like, yeah, I don't go anything but like a Bible. No. Again, it's a more organic way of believing. It's an organic form of belief. There is a practice which is connected with the celebration of 8 pagan holidays throughout the year. Rituals are also done for special occasions like coming of age, marriages, and death. Yeah, I've done several of these myself. Uh, as as much as possible, I try to, even my calendar. Where is it? There it is. I personally have tried to reintroduce the use of as I'm not the only one, obviously, but you know, trying to reintroduce the use of the Anglo-Saxon calendar. So we are right now in Blotmannath. I can't remember what they said the exact day was. Boom. 21st. So hang on, if I go that one instead. Yeah. So today, Monday, the Monday, November the 14th, 2022, is the 20th of Blotmannath. And Blotmannath, is part of the lunar calendar. That's how the Anglo-Saxons would try to do it. Most of what's known about it comes from from Bede, known as the Venerable Bede. His piece on the reckoning of time, in which he relates the calendars of many ancient cultures. He gives quite a bit of information. Unfortunately, he doesn't give quite enough information as to reconstruct the calendar in its entirety. So again, assumptions are again. I mentioned this earlier. Traditionalist pagans, whilst they're trying to bring back some of the old ways, they have to realise that it's not going to be absolute. So essentially, they are still neo-pagan. Anyway. Who are neo-pagan heroes and heroines? Besides Gerald Gardner, some recent figures associated with neo-paganism are Margaret Murray, Robert Graves, James Fraser. Theoreticians are Isaac Bonewitz, Aidan Kelly, and Starhawk. Other notorieties include Z Budapest if you're American, Morgan McFarlane, Selena Fox, Timon Morning Glory, Zell Ravenheart, and Gwydion Penthrowen. I don't look at stuff like that. I mean, my heroes are Freddie Mercury and Steve Irwin, and Steve Irwin above Freddie Mercury. Do I have heroes like that? No. Like I said, it's more. I don't look at big names in these fields and base what I believe off what they believe. I won't go and do my own research into the histories, into our history in this country especially. Research different types of paganism, and my beliefs are influenced from what I believe are correct to me, if that makes sense, across different things. Comparing the New Age to Neo-Paganism. He now systematically compares New Agers to Neo-Pagans across 27 categories. So, and he says, please peruse the table to get a handle on where we're going. Table. Oh, right, okay, yeah. So, time, place, and ontology. The first major difference has to do with ontology. New Agers draw mostly from Eastern traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and the theosophy of Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. Neo-Pagans draw from the Western tradition of witchcraft, hermetism, for fuck's sake, hermeticism, and alchemy. Closely possible that I have that alchemy might come into it, but anyway, closely connected to this are the differences in the attitudes towards matter. New Agers follow Eastern traditions that say that matter is an illusion at worst and a derivative of the spirit at best. Neo-Pagans treat matter as real, recalcitrant, and to be struggled with. Again, I'm definitely not New Ager in this sense. By the way, if you this far in, 1 hour and 21 minutes, let me know where you think you fall on this. Be interested. Western alchemists saw that their work was to redeem matter by changing sulfur, salt, and mercury into gold, which scientifically was never going to work. For New Agers, the universe is one and transcendental to the material world. As I said earlier, that with the exception of some female Wiccan goddess or some female Wiccan goddess worshippers, all Neo-Pagans speak of nature as plural. Yeah. They are either polytheists or animists and believe that the powers are immanent. Nature is self-creating and self-regulating. Yeah, it deals with itself. Yeah, I don't believe that my gods are, actively doing all the things that Christians think their God does. They just are, if that makes sense. Lastly, New Agers follow Huxley's perennialism, which says that all world religions have esoteric core claims which are the same around the world. The differences between the religions are exoteric, superficial, superstitious, and decadent. For Neo-Pagans, sacred knowledge comes from local places which are unique to it and cannot be joined with others without tradition being watered down or lost. Yeah. It's why I don't, it's why I have to think about myself. I don't want us to lose our Western Germanic or Celtic traditions, which are unique to this part of the world. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have, other cultures in this country, but we shouldn't lose ours in the process. New Agers do not spend much time analysing the past. I fucking do. They believed that ancient societies were wiser and contained spiritual wisdom that was lost with the age of Pisces. What matters is that we are living in the present and the long distant future of the age of Aquarius. New Agers have no axe to grind with the past. This is not so with pagans, as we shall see next. Yeah. I'm not a fan of the whole ignoring. I don't like ignorance anyway, and to me, New Age belief kind of is a bit ignorant, just a little bit. Attitudes towards Christianity. Neo-Pagans are very aware of what Christians did to pagans at the end of the Roman Empire. The brutal killing of Hypatia and the burning of the Alexandrian library is just the tip of the iceberg. In the Renaissance, pagans had to hide their magical practices. The decentralized state, along with Protestants and Catholics, persecuted the witches in early modern Europe. Pagans, for the most part, are anti-Christians, and even today have to worry about being persecuted. Exactly. Many neo-pagans neither forgive nor forget. Exactly. Like, you know, there was an aspect of early Catholicism adopting and adapting many pagan practices and such, but that's more to do with trying to convert pagans into Christians. Yeah, New Agers are much more likely to be eclectic and incorporate Christianity. Yeah, that's not happening with me. For example, in response to Marilyn Ferguson's questionnaire, the Christian paleontologist Teilhard de Chardin was named as their greatest inspiration. See, he might be paleontologist, but he's coming from a Christian cultural background, which means the way he thinks and looks at this, looks at paleontology, would probably be different to me. It was named Barbara Marx Hubbard's book Conscious Evolution is modelled on Chardin's work. Paolo Soleri's building of Azracasanti in central Arizona has been inspired by Chardin. So it's spelled Chardin, but I swear that's French, so that's Chardin. Like garden, jardin, but Chardin. Anyway, furthermore, New Agers have welcomed Dominican Catholic priest Matthew Fox into the fold. Fox's creation spirituality even made room for Wiccan Starhawk on his teaching staff. Interesting. Attitudes towards authority, community, subculture, and countercultures. In the Wiccan tradition was visited by a passing comet during the radical wing of the women's liberation movement in the late 60s and early 70s, and some women were not satisfied with the promises of patriarchal churches to reform, and they searched for a women's spirituality beyond organised religion. They found it in Wicca. These women carried the same leveling tendency into Wicca that they carried with them into the New Left. They met little resistance from Wiccan covens that were already established. Neo-pagan communities generally consist of many people who are self-educated and who are hostile to most authorities. A culture that they create is a strong counterculture which consists of covens, bookstores, coffee houses in cities, and self-sustaining farms in rural areas. These are countercultures which are in conscious opposition to the dominant culture. While pagans can be very individualist, most of their practice is community based. That's where I take inspiration from shamanism. New Agers have had less of a history of persecution and are far less afraid of being harassed by mainstream religious authorities. They are more respectful of authorities, especially Eastern teachers, and are much more likely to be victims of cults. There is a New Age culture that can be seen at talks, conferences, or festivals, but is not built out of necessity and is much more loosely formed. New Agers are more at home with structured authorities and do not have communities which gather to create a New Age experience. As we shall see, Most New Agers come out of professional settings and are more individualistic and less experienced in creating a community independent of the authorities. Drug-induced mystical versus magical states of consciousness. As hallucinogens have been important in New Age culture, going all the way back to Huxley's use of mescaline. Psychologist Stanislav Grof has studied and advocated for LSD, and Terence McKenna has argued. Heard of McKenna? I'm pretty sure I would end up shouting at the screen when I listened to him talk. Anyway, has argued for the power of hallucinogenics in tribal societies. This has been around for fuck knows how long. Setting aside the issue of drugs, an altered state of consciousness can be achieved in two ways. Okay. One is through sensory deprivation, which can create a mystical experience. Yeah. The other, a sensory saturation, which creates a magical state of consciousness. For New Agers, their major influences have been Eastern. Various forms of meditation have been the road to a spiritual state of mind, while Neo-Pagans may use meditation as an initial starting point to ground themselves at the beginning of a ritual. The ritual is not itself meditative. The use of drumming, singing, dancing, colourful costumes, incense and food saturate the senses to create enthusiasm or ecstasy. This is an active trance state in which the participant travels is in some cases possessed. So, astral projection sort of thing. Mystical states create calm, passive revelation. Magical states create controlled pandemonium where all the gods speak. The paranormal archetypes and supernaturalism. Marilyn Ferguson's questionnaire for New Agers indicated that there was very high belief in ESP, clairvoyance and telepathy, 85 to 94%. Margot Alder gave no corresponding results for Neo-Pagans, but it's safe to say a large number of Neo-Pagans also believe in paranormal phenomenon. However, there are two important differences. There are more Neo-Pagans who not only are interested in the new sciences, but are more skeptical and willing to criticize them from a knowledge of scientific methodology, like myself. New Agers, in my experience, are more likely to commit to the confirmation bias and not look for evidence that contradicts what they already believe. Exactly. It's something that drives me mad that so many people that I've come across refuse to challenge their own beliefs. I've had to challenge my own beliefs so many fucking times. That's why I'm at the point I'm at. The second important difference about belief in the paranormal is that Neo-Pagans have seasonal rituals in which they have a positive group experience on a repeated basis. Yes and no on that front. They are aware that the social group has the power to alter their state of consciousness. This, yes. They have less need to believe in paranormal experiences in order to feel connected. In addition, many Neo-Pagans do not even believe in the independent existence of goddesses or gods. Some think they are Jungian archetypes, which are the product of humanity, not a spiritual world. Yeah, like I said, there's an aspect to that in the way I think of things, but whilst I believe I have gods, I don't anthropomorphize them, if that makes sense. However, I do pay homage to my ancestors who did. human nature and individual power. Since New Agers tend to see matter as an illusion, it seems hardly far-fetched to think that they see dark and negative forces as products of short-sightedness, ignorance, or egotism, but uh, but in no sense real. This has led them to being called Pollyannish, seeing the world through rose-tinted glasses. The spiritual power that comes with enlightenment is so powerful that it is thought that individuals create their own reality, as Shirley MacLaine has argued. I think I don't think I agree with that. Just as Neo-Pagans see matter as real and recalcitrant, they also understand that forces that are considered dark as real and are much deeper than short-sightedness or egotism. Neo-Pagans might draw on evolutionary psychology or specifically sexual selection to explain conflicts between males and females. It's exactly where I go. So too, they might explain conflicts as evolutionary mismatches between the conditions under which we formed our human nature, hunter-gatherers, and our contemporary industrial capitalist societies, which are far removed from those conditions. What follows is that for neo-pagans, neither individuals or groups create their own reality. We are limited in what we can achieve, as both the biophysical world and the socio-historical worlds are larger systems and cannot be pacified or reduced to background. Yeah. As there's, religion and culture are connected and separate at the same time, and that to me is not a hypocritical or contradictory point of view. Politics and economics. In her book, The Aquarian Conspiracy, Marilyn Ferguson claims that politically New Agers constitute a radical centre. Okay, the radical centre, a combination of Republicans and Democrats, but there is no New Age consensus about this. There really are no conservative New Agers. There seem to be a combination of New Deal liberals, or they are libertarians. Neo-pagans are much broader politically. Yeah, I've known pagans from the political right and the left, and those who are in the centre. Neo-pagans are there is a strong anarchist presence in the work of Starhawk, and reclaiming groups have spread from the San Francisco Bay Area to other parts of the country. Of the contrary, I think that's supposed to be country actually, but in addition, neo-pagans seem to be the New Deal liberals, but there are also two more right-wing elements. The heathen Nordic tradition in the United States has more patriarchal elements and has been accused by other neo-pagans as fascist. Yeah, I kind of fall down that myself. It's like they've taken the Nordic traditions and warped them. In Europe, some neo-pagans who are part of the ceremonial magic traditions, such as the Golden Dawn, are reactionaries or even monarchists. Dolores Ashcraft Nowitzki. Ceremonial magic have orders with graded hierarchies. It makes sense that if their orders are hierarchical, it is a reflection of their beliefs about human political systems. Yeah, I suppose that's fair. New Agers are not bashful about thinking there is nothing wrong with material success. See, there's a difference here. Neither do they seem to worry about the cost of their workshops and lectures might be beyond the financial reach of working class or poor people. In the index of the Aquarian Conspiracy, there is no entry about either capitalism or socialism, which means to him that is what What it means to him is that economics is not thought of in a systematic way in calling capitalism, rather it's just seen as the economy. It seems to have never crossed their minds that they might be promoting spiritual capitalism. Yeah, I can see that. Neo-Pagans are very critical of New Age leaders charging large sums of money for what spiritual knowledge they have to offer. Yep. Yep. Totally yes. I am so far against the bullshit you get from so-called spiritualists who charge stupid amounts of money for seances. Well, fuck off. It drives me mad. Traditionally in Wicca, the craft is passed down without charge. Exactly. Knowledge shouldn't be paid for, if that makes sense. The important thing is that the inspiring student be serious, do the work, be consistent in attendance, and pass on what's been learned in the same spirit in which was given, for free. Exactly. Which is why I quite like this on YouTube. You know, I can learn and others can learn for free. That is just, to me, right there, is where pagans and socialists are on the same level. Pagans are the most likely of neo-pagans to be anti-capitalist. Some, like Zed Budapest, envision a socialist matriarchy, I suppose. Like I said, whilst I'm not Wicca, so to speak, like, again, I take inspirations from various parts of paganism, but it's learned. It's not just felt. It's learned and felt, not just felt. There is learning to be done. There is analysis to be done. But again, I have a fundamental belief, and I've always had this, that education should be free, which is socialist, and it turns out fucking pagan. Gender and class. In Marilyn Ferguson's questionnaire, she said that most of her sample were professionals, meaning upper middle class. There is no representation of working class people. Lovely. In addition, to the extent that the New Age supports Eastern traditions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, or Zen, they buy into an Eastern patriarchal framework. The presence of cults that often comes out of these traditions and guarantees there will be extreme dominance by a leader, which in cults is almost inevitably a male. In her book Drawing Down the Moon, Margot Adler says that some of the first witches she met in England were working class. To the extent that Wiccans own farms that they work on, they are likely to be what Marx called petty bourgeois. Usually rural pagans do all the work on the farm themselves, including blacksmithing, tanning, weaving, and selling to a market. There is also a middle class and upper class neo-pagans. The number one profession for neo-pagans on Adler's survey were a computer programmer, systems analyst, or software developer. But third on her list is secretarial clerical, indicating membership in white-collar working class. There are middle class and upper class workers such as teachers or therapists, but the percentage of upper middle class is lower than for New Agers. Lastly, neo-pagans are extremely supportive of feminism. Some Dianic witches don't even allow men in their covens. Allow men in their covens. The structure of Wicca gives more weight to goddesses than gods, and it has been an adjustment for the male Wiccans not to be centered in these rituals. Yeah, generally Wiccan men are very supportive, and the presence of gay men in the rituals has helped feminism. Probably, that I can see that. Practical application. New Age communities can be seen in 3 applications. The first is Burning Man, which began in '86 and has lasted to the present. This is a yearly creative gathering that began in San Francisco and then moved to Black Rock, Nevada. In his opinion, in Bruce's opinion, this gathering draws young upper middle class people who are disappointed they missed the 1960s and want to make up for that period. In recent years, it has been intended by wealthy people whom some complain have not respected the principle of self-reliance. It has gotten more and more expensive to attend. Some say the role-playing and self-expression are more signs of narcissism and capitalist decadence than model communities of the future. Yeah, it's just idealism from rich people getting away so they can have their orgies. Another New Age community project is one started by an Italian city planner and follower of Teilhard de Chardin, Paolo Soleri. His project started in the 1970s to build an urban environment which encourages intense social interaction in the absence of large-scale industry, and built with ecologically sensitivity. It has been worked on for 40 years with an ideal of housing 5,000 people. Findhorn Foundation, or Findhorn, I think it's Findhorn Foundation, an intentional village community located in Scotland, has been developing since the 1980s. The community is based on the theosophical principles of Alex Bailey. Neo-Pagans are less interested in large-scale intentional communities. In witchcraft, the basic unit is the coven. The coven usually consists of between 8 and 13 people who meet a minimum of 8 times a year to celebrate and ritualize the 8 pagan holidays of the year, usually. I said much of us, like ourselves, are more individualistic, but yeah, I have attended a couple of these myself. There are some are more ambitious and meet to celebrate coming of age rituals, marriages, or funerals of individual members. There's been a growth in recent years of neo-pagan regional conferences and festivals. Yeah. Yeah, and there are some organizations, the Pagan Federation, for example, so as to have communication with the government and parliament, especially over here. Prospect. Is it possible to synthesize socialism with the New Age and neo-paganism? Towards the beginning of this chapter, he identifies commonalities between the New Age and neo-paganism. He will selectively use some commonalities to pose some questions. Both neo-pagans and New Agers reject mainstream Judeo-Christianity. Would this help or hinder the development of socialism? Most socialist theoreticians claim to be atheists, so they would agree with rejecting Judeo-Christianity. However, they would not want to replace it with Eastern mysticism or gods and goddesses. But what about with possible recruits from the working class, many of whom may be fundamentalists? Both neo-pagans and New Agers reject religious, political and scientific authorities and trust their own experience. Bit generalistic, as like I said, whilst I reject many authorities, I'm not absolutist in this. What would the working class think of this? The organization of both New Agers and Neo-Paganism is decentralized. Will that help the will that organization help or hurt the development of socialism? Yeah, I think I could see that. We said the outlook of both movements is optimistic. Will this optimism help or hinder the building of socialism? Well, it's better than starting off with pessimism, I suppose. Both Neo-Pagans and New Agers claim that human beings have a higher identity than the ego. Each claim to have a higher self that is capable of tapping into a deeper reality. Will this new identity be welcomed or mocked by socialists? Unlike mainstream religions, neither New Agers or Neo-Pagans claim they are missionaries and say that they are not in the business of conversion. Given that historically socialists have tried to convert the working class, this lack of missionary zeal will not set so well with socialist theoreticians. Neither Neo-Pagans or New Agers personify or objectify evil. Given that socialists claim that capitalism is the root of all social problems, do socialists personify capitalists as evil? If so, wrong maybe? Some of them definitely evil, but yeah. Given the socialists claim that capitalism is, if so, does this mean that socialism loses its edge if it stops pros proselytizing? Both Neo-Pagans and New Agers reject linear concepts of time for cyclic and non-linear time frames. This would seem to go very well with Marxian dialectical shape of history. Okay. Yeah. Although I wouldn't class myself as Marxian. In part 2 of this article, he will discuss how each. So this is going to be part 1 because it's already fucking 2 hours long. Yeah, I'm going to do this as a 2-parter. And when, yeah, like I said, I'll go into the second part of this article on another video, but we're at 1 hour and 52 fucking minutes, 1 hour and 53 minutes. So yeah, in this section, he will only use the categories of comparison in order to pose but not answer more questions. New Agers are drawn to Eastern traditions and Neo-Pagans to the West. Should that matter to socialists? If so, why? I suppose that depends on what kind of socialist, because there is a difference between, it seems, between socialism in the East and socialism from the West, or socialism in the North and socialism in the South. There are differences. To me, it seems that way. And if it does matter to socialists, why? Should it matter to socialists whether Neo-Pagans or New Agers understand nature as a single force or as a plurality of forces? Should it matter to socialists if nature is understood as both self-creating and self-sustaining, or whether there is a force beyond nature? Is matter real or independent of consciousness, or is matter an illusion and only consciousness is real? Why should this matter to socialists? It's a damn good question. I mean, there's the, the realism of recognizing some materialism. You know, esotericism. You know, is a bit wishy-washy, and you know, with socialism, you do break things down. You look at least with some social types of socialism, you look at what constitutes the running of an economy, the running of a country, and what bits work how, and you improve these not based on profit margins or on how much capital you have, but on the efficient, on how efficient these services are. So yeah, to me, I see Neo-Pagans being closer to socialism, as it is right now anyway. Both New Agers and Neo-Pagans emphasize the importance of creating altered states of consciousness with drugs or by sensory deprivation or sensory saturation techniques. Does this get in the way of building socialism, or can it advance it? It can help us to think new ideas. Neo-Pagans are further away from mainstream culture than New Agers. Can this assist or hinder socialist attempts or organise and sustain socialist organisations? Many New Agers are convinced that paranormal psychology is real and that we must cultivate those skills. How will this be received by socialist theoreticians and socialist recruits from the working class? Both movements reject reductionist science for the new non-linear science in the fields of physics and the brain. Will socialists jump on this bandwagon or dismiss the science as pseudoscience? How will socialists greet the New Age notion that people are good and only are bad? How will socialists greet the New Age notion that people are good and only turn bad because they are uneducated, ignorant, and short-sighted? Okay. Will they agree with Neo-Pagan characterizations of the New Age as Pollyanna? Freedom is highly valued by both New Agers and Neo-Pagans, but is there such thing as going too far? Yes. How will it go over with the working class people when Shirley MacLaine tells each working class individual that they create their own reality? Yeah, personally, I think that's stupid. Some New Agers claim to believe in reincarnation. Okay. Some individuals are working out karma based on past lives. What will this do to socialist organising? How might it help a working class person to know they were a prince or a pauper in another life? The class composition of New Agers is primarily upper middle class. How easy will it be for socialists to integrate them into socialist organisation? Many Wiccans are organised into covens. Will that organisation help or get in the way of building a socialist mass party? I'm not sure that's... Yeah, anyway. New Agers are more hierarchical than Neo-Pagans, and they are more likely to accept a spiritual leader who is most of the time a man. How will this be received by socialists? Many women into feminist Wicca are anarchists, so how will this work with a socialist party organised along Leninist lines? Some New Agers are libertarian and commercial capitalists. Do these folk have any redeeming value for socialists? If a radical socialist union were taken on a tour of Findhorn Solari's Arcosanti city, or an admission to a 9-day Burning Man, what would they think? And what would it be like for the same group to be invited to one of the spiritual dance rituals of Starhawk's organisation Reclaiming? We will address. He'll address and provide the answers to these questions in part 2 of the article. So, yeah, that's the first part of this. I'm just gonna quickly check. Yes. So yeah, got a little table here of Neo-Pagan versus New Pagan versus the New Age movement. So you got in Neo-Pagan, you got Western witchcraft, Hermetic, and alchemy. And in New Age, you got Eastern Buddhism, Hinduism, Theosophy, liberal Christianity, and there are, it's cross-cultural sources. What are sacred presences? So for New Ages, it's transcendental, and for us pagans, it's immanent. Are sacred presences singular or plural? For us, it's plural, and that comes under animism or polytheism. And for many in New Age, I've heard of this. It comes under the one, the great singular one. Real and recalcitrant. So what is matter for us pagans? It's real and recalcitrant and redeemable, and for New Age, it's an illusion, mirage. This is all. I think that's part of where the theory for or inspiration for some of the theory for all of this being a simulation comes from. I think New Agers would marry more with that than they would with what I would believe. Anyway, importance of the past and future. More on past persecution, witch killings, and reawakening. It's not just that for pagans. Like that's very generalistic. Like for me, and I think you can prove me wrong, Tom, but I think it's the same for Tom Rousel. Survive the Jive. It's not just about past persecution. It's about the past. It's about learning. It's about learning from our past, and not just forgetting it. And the important for New Ages is more on future and Age of Aquarius crap. I believe that the future is important, but we have to inform ourselves on how to behave going forward by informing ourselves on what happened in the past. A bit ridiculous to believe otherwise, in my own eye. Anyway, attitude towards Christianity for most pagans: hostile persecutions by Christians at the end of the Roman Empire, early modern Europe, and witch burnings. And it's just funny because they were burning Christians as well as pagans, so whereas New Agers are somewhat more tolerant. Chardin, Paolo Sileri, Barbara Marx Hubbard, and Matthew Fox, or they don't mind it. Also states the consciousness is more magical for us, filling the senses and imagination and diffusing the consciousness, whereas for them it's mystical, emptying out senses and imagination and focusing the consciousness. Now, I suppose on that one point, focused consciousness, I believe that aspects of that. I use aspects of that, but I also believe in the other. So the use of senses is sensory saturation versus sensory deprivation. Yeah, I can get cognitive dissonance, sensory dissonance, but my favorite, largely my favorite music is metal, which is rather dissonant. It's emotional. Sorry, epistemology, active trance state, ecstasy, enthusiasm, and possession. And for them, it's passive revelation, calm, epistemological individualism. So yeah. Yeah, I see. This is just strange because I believe in individualism, but I don't believe. I also don't believe that individualism is necessarily separate from the community. Being an individual doesn't mean you're necessarily separate from the community, from your people. This is realism. Anyway, attitude towards authority. Pagans tend to be anti-authoritarian and not really cultish, whereas it's authoritarian, and you do tend to get more of the cultish thing when it comes to the New Age stuff. Distance from mainstream. There's pagans seem to see each other as a counterculture. Whereas New Agers see it more as a subculture. I see paganism as a culture, not either counterculture or subculture. Well, I mean, there's more towards counterculture than subculture, but there's an aspect of subculturism in that. Anyway, community in terms of authorities is more individualistic community without authorities for pagans, and individualistic needs authorities to have a community. Yeah, for New Agers. Existence of the paranormal for pagans is less concerned, have group psychology to fall back on, essentially. For us, we know about spirits and the ancestors, whereas New Agers get really into it. Attitudes towards science and science fiction. Pagans are more for new science, complexity theory, and science fiction, whereas the New Agers more like quantum physics, general systems theory, and brain science. So yeah, complexity theory and science fiction. I see that. Sacred knowledge. Sacred knowledge for paganism comes from local places and unique traditions, and are saying different things. Whereas New Agers are, it's more perennial. I said this word earlier perfectly. Perennialism, or esotericism, which is all spiritual traditions at root are saying the same thing. Human nature, how either side views human nature. There's light and dark, recognizes reality of aggression and works with it. See, again, there are a lot of people these days that think that see anger as bad and is nasty, and it's the thing we need to do away with. Whereas, no, anger is part of our nature. Not just our nature, is part of, you can see anger in other animals. So I don't go along with the New Ager thing of tends to explain away aggression and dark forces, tends to be Pollyanna. Celibacy. Yeah, pagans don't really believe in the celibacy thing so much. I don't see the point in it so much myself. Apparently, New Agers see more in celibacy. Some want to rechannel sexuality, I suppose, yeah, from their point of view. How powerful is the individual in impacting reality? So for pagans, people are part of the larger system and limited impact on reality. So there's only so much we can do. And with so pagans are less likely to blame the victim of something, whereas New Agers are, because you create your own reality. It's fucking stupid, in my own personal opinion. Existence of reincarnation. So for pagans, yes, round of nature with plants and animals, and yeah, they're like both sides believe in it, but one's individual karma and the other's round of nature with plants and animals. Social class involvement. So for pagans, it's more working class, artisans, middle class, and upper middle class, whereas the New Agers are, by and large, just upper middle class. Attitude towards women, is pagans tend to be more feminist, and I say tend to be, and New Agers tend to be more patriarchal. Politics tend to be left liberal for pagans and anarchist feminists, whereas left liberal and libertarian in the US, it's more centrist, centre left. Economics, anti-capitalist, comfortable, not interested in wealth. So yeah, have money, but you don't have to have all the money. Whereas the New Agers seem to be pro-capitalist, into worldly success and material well-being. Types of sacred exchange: pass on without fee, and money for classes and workshops pass on without fee for paganism, and money for classes and workshops with New Agers. Practical application: local witches, covens, circle, spiritual alliance, Selena Fox conferences, festivals, and such. Our holidays have been around our festivals and celebrations have been around for thousands of years, hundreds, if not thousands of years. For the New Agers, it's more arcane practices, seances and shit. So theoreticians, practitioners, and writers for paganism. So you got Margaret Murray, Gerald Gardner, Raymond Buckland, Starhawk, Selena Fox, and Margot Adler. And on the side of New Agers, you're thinking Maharishi Yogananda, Ramdas, Aurobindo, Swedenborg, Illumination, New England Transcendentalists, Theodore Roosevelt, Marilyn Ferguson. Foundation texts are looked upon as spiritual dance, spiral dance, and drawing down the moon for pagans, and for New Agers it's A Course in Miracles and Aquarian Conspiracy. So yeah, I just, with that kind of thing, I don't. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, so to finish all this, it's two and a quarter hours doing this. Fuck. Um. So to me personally, so far, it seems that there are many aspects to paganism that do correspond quite well with socialism, especially when they aren't taken out of context. Um, when if I can find it, if it's out yet, the second half to this piece, if I can find it, that'll be the next part. And if it's not out yet, when it does, I will then do the part 2 to this. But just as a last part, I will be doing shorter videos on this subject of, like, a large part of what this channel is about is I am a pagan socialist, so I believe that paganism can reconcile with socialism. As I explained a few times, and have elaborated as such on different points, that the decentralized nature of paganism as it is right now isn't necessarily a hindrance to socialism, but I'd like to see more effort in this area, and more effort and study in this area. I hope we all enjoyed this. Again, I'm sorry if it's a bit dry or boring, but this I think was incredibly interesting. And again, I will be coming out with smaller videos, shorter videos that that are on this subject of bringing paganism. How does paganism reconcile with society as it runs now? How do pagans come back in from the cold, if that makes sense? So yeah, this has been Shadow Eater. This has been my Dog Specky, my Dog Viska. I do hope that this wasn't too boring for people, but again, I think this is extraordinarily interesting. I've been looking for pieces like this, and I'll be looking for more of it. I hope everyone has a good evening, good night, good morning. It's 3 o'clock in the fucking morning here right now. I should be back up making more videos tomorrow, probably on politics, but again, more will be done on this subject. Bless the Thursday, everyone. It's been Shadow Eater. Have a good, ha en god kväll.